panel. So the first one that would like to answer.
I don't have so much experience with pain, but usually for pain you need the THC. You cannot avoid it. The THC is what's working for pain, and it's different from adults than children, but in adults the risks are relatively low, and you can give strains with high THC in a reasonable dose. It depends on the patient, but in reasonable dose, in the expected dose, it's not a problem. In children, it's more problematic to give THC, and you should consider it really carefully. There are a few children that I give them THC for pain, but there are really few. It should be really justified to do it, if this was a question.
Okay. Buenas tardes. Mi pregunta es para el profesor Tam. En cuanto a los compuestos que ustedes estuvieron estudiando para el tratamiento de la obesidad y el síndrome metabólico, teniendo en cuenta que esas enfermedades son de desarrollo crónico, ¿ustedes evaluaron cuál es, si hay efectos tóxicos de la administración crónica de esas sustancias? Y además, una vez que después de un tiempo se terminan de administrar, si existen situaciones de tipo de efecto rebote, que son muy comunes cuando se suspenden los tratamientos para obesidad o las medicaciones.
So the question was about the length of time that we have used our compounds and whether we saw any toxicity. So our current studies show that if we use the drug that I've just shown you that we developed and tested in animals, we can use it up to 3 months so far, and there was no toxicity that was found, at least not in animals. And we have done this study not only in mice, but also rats, dogs, and larger animals, because in order to promote it into clinical evaluation, toxicity studies have to be completed, and no red flags were raised during these studies. If it's going to be a rebound effect of stopping taking the drug, it might be, but you have to remember that once you treat a patient, unlike animal studies, with a drug for obesity, you also asking him or her to change some of his diet and regular lifestyle modification, and we cannot do it in animals, because once we replace for the animals the high-fat diet to a regular diet, they will lose weight. So the efficacy of the drug in the animal models show a great efficacy while the animals remain on high-fat diet, consuming high-fat diet. So we believe even that if we give it to patients and also asking them to change their lifestyle and their diet and increase the activity, you will get even better effect, which will set the threshold at a new set point to the time where it's going to, you will be able to stop taking the medication and move on with your life.
Tengo una pregunta acá en el iPad para el doctor Adi Aran. La voy a decir en hebreo y la va a contestar en inglés. אני אגיד לך בעברית ואתה תענה באנגלית. שואלת פה אימא שהיא גם ביוכימאית, שהבת שלה חולת אוטיסטית, והיא שואלת לגבי מינונים ואיזה זן הכי מתאים.
So the question was which strain and what are the doses preferred for autism and epilepsy together. So lucky for us, it's the same strain that is better, that is working for autism and epilepsy in children. So you need to give strains with high CBD. at least 10 times more CBD than THC. For epilepsy, it's not so good to give strains with higher THC. For autism, in some instances, it can be okay. It depends how much the seizures are controlled or not. If the seizures are controlled, so you can increase a little bit the THC. If the seizures are not controlled, you cannot increase the THC, and you have to remain with strains that contain mostly CBD. The dose, you up-titrated it to tolerability and to effect, which means you start slowly and you start in low dose and you go up slowly. Usually we start with something like 10 milligrams of CBD per day, and then we increase it every 2 to 3 days till 10 milligrams per kilogram per day. For epilepsy, you can increase the dose even more to 20 milligrams per kilograms per day, but it depends on the tolerability. And if there is something specific, I can answer.
No, it's not specific. And the other question for Professor Adi, has the observation study was been published?
The observation study was sent for publication to pediatrics. It's under review, and I don't know, it should be decided.
Seguimos con preguntas.
Hola, buenas tardes. Para el panel, quería consultarles si tienen alguna evidencia, ya que en las placas estaba enumerado del cannabis para el tratamiento del síndrome de Tourette y el uso del THC para el tratamiento del síndrome de Tourette, ya que nosotros administramos para nuestro hijo extractos caseros y regulamos los espasmos con altos contenidos de THC. Quería saber si ustedes tenían algún tipo de estudio realizado.
I will answer that. Okay. It's true that for Tourette, you should give, for the tics, you should give strains with high THC. There are not so many studies about, though it's a common knowledge that cannabis is working for Tourette. In my experience, it's also working for my patients. But there are not so many studies. There are few studies, and the evidence are not so in favor of giving cannabis for Tourette. But you should remember two things. One, it's really you need THC for the tics. And second, that THC is not so recommended in children. So I don't know how old is the child, but I almost never give cannabis for children with Tourette, only for adolescents in, like, let's say 17, 18 years old and older. But to younger children, I don't give cannabis usually because of the risks with high THC strains, which usually overweight the benefits from tic reduction, because you know there are many medications and also behavioral therapies to control the tics. There are also good behavioral therapies to control tics. There is something we call CBIT. It's like the CBT. But it's not CBT, and it's also working, so you should be very cautious. In generally, it's not recommended, of course, to make the cannabis at home, as you don't make anything else at home. You don't make medications at home. It might not be accurate. We treat the cannabis like medications for any aspect of it, and it's not recommended to make cannabis at home.
Maybe I will add one more thing about Tourette syndrome. As I mentioned it yesterday, this is one of the clinical indications that has been approved by the Israel Ministry of Health to give THC and medical cannabis to treat these patients. So it's under the law, at least in Israel. And as Dr. Aran has said, it's with high THC levels.
I have another question here. When you treat a child, do you need to do stops between the treatments? When you treat a child, do you need to do stops between the treatments, or can you give it with no stops?
Yes. Usually, there is no need to stop the treatment in the middle. You can treat it constantly like any other medication. We don't usually do honeymoons in medications or stop the medication in the middle of the treatment. I know that some families think that it's better to stop the treatment once in month, 1 month, 2 months for 24, 48 hours, and it's better for their children. Most of my patients, we don't do that. In the vast majority of the patients, we don't do that, and I didn't see any evidence for the need to do that.
Sí, por favor, preguntas.
Sí, para el profesor Rami Yaka. Ayer habló sobre adicciones. Yo soy psicóloga y trabajo particularmente con adicciones a la cocaína. Me interesó mucho algo que explicó usted acerca de enfocar a través de la ínsula cerebral, preceder el sistema de preferencia al de recompensa que maneja el adicto, y que en eso se estaba trabajando en la formulación en el futuro de algún fármaco que pueda acompañar principalmente las recaídas, que es el mayor problema que tenemos en el campo clínico en adicción a la cocaína. Quería saber si puede hablar un poco más de esto o dar un lineamiento un poco más que amplíe el tema.
Yes, so yesterday I showed, so my research is focused mainly on the withdrawal, how to prevent relapse after prolonged withdrawal. So as I told you yesterday, there is a very high rate of relapse to any kind of addiction, especially for stimulants like cocaine. And what we looked over the years is the adaptations in the brain that causes this relapse, because we assume that, or we hypothesize that what happens after withdrawal, all the changes in the brain that incubate, and I show some data that clearly show that when you withdraw from the drug, you trigger a neuroadaptation which emphasize in morphological changes in protein function in the brain that we think are responsible for relapse. The role of cannabinoids in this system, not only in cocaine, by the way, it's almost in all drugs that we tested, alcohol and opiates, we have these neuroadaptations, and what we trying to reverse it with several, with different angles. So one of the angles was to try to see whether activation of the endocannabinoid system will be beneficial. So what we saw, for example, that there is first that the endocannabinoid system sees the addiction as a pathological problem. I mean, there is like any other kind of disease that provoke the involvement of the endogenous machinery to protect against the pathology. The same with addiction. It's not differ from any other disease that provoke this system, but it's fairly new to assume that, and the first evidence was from this smoking cessation after the insula were damaged after the accidents that people had, stopped smoking, and they refer the insula as one of the regions that engage in the relapse process. So what we found is that when you treat chronically with CBD after withdrawal, okay, you can prevent, for example, we tested in 2 different paradigms. I won't elaborate, but I just say that one test is reward per se. So you test directly if the animals would like cocaine or not by measuring the time it will spend in the environment which you got cocaine, and it completely blocked the effect. And we think it's via the involvement of its antioxidant capacity. And of course, the target is the reward system. And we're still evaluating now where is the target in the reward system, whether it decreases dopamine levels, whether it blocks the receptors. It had to do with synaptic transmission, and what we have some preliminary evidence that it, of course, focused on the reward system, but more precisely in all plasticity changes that occurs following withdrawal. So the idea is to first recognize that the endogenous system is coming to protect and recognize addiction as a problem, and trying to boosting the system by giving exogenous cannabinoids, endocannabinoids, to try to prevent or reverse the, and we succeeded to show it with preference. The other model that I showed was sensitization, which measure the neuroadaptations that occurs following withdrawal, and the same thing. You give it after withdrawal, you prevent completely the expression of sensitization, meaning when you test it, you wait a long time after withdrawal, and it's a very long time. The stamp that the very short history of cocaine, or any drugs, by the way, it's not only cocaine, that lives on the reward system is very long. It stayed there almost for, at least as far as we tested, for a very long time. And you can clearly reverse it by antioxidants such as CBD. So we tried CBD and many other antioxidants, and CBD, among others, did completely reverse the neuroadaptation, and we believe behaviorally that in humans it will prevent relapse, or at least will reduce the numbers of relapse attempts in cocaine addicts. Not only cocaine, as I told you, we're now looking at alcohol and other drugs of abuse, the ability of antioxidants such as CBD to reduce craving and relapse. I hope I answered the question.
I have one more question for from the iPad. There, a group of parents that treat it's for the whole panel, especially for AD, but I think it's for everybody. A group of people that treats sick kids with homemade medical cannabis. So they're asking what dose, how to extract, a lot of questions. So what is your answer?
So let me have a general comment about this question. Extracting the product in a personal way at home shouldn't be the correct way to do it. We should treat cannabis as a drug like simple and different drugs that we get prescription from the medical doctors, such as antibiotics, and that he or she prescribed with a certain and specific amount, we should treat cannabis with. So therefore, we cannot have our own ability to do it precisely, correctly, and repeatedly at home and expect that we will always get the same effect. As I've discussed yesterday, the plant is very complicated. It contains more than 1,400 different compounds, and changing in the extraction procedure will affect immediately the amount of the different compounds inside the cannabis. And therefore, if we would like to have a very precise drug prepared from this extraction, we won't be able to do it unless it is being done at manufacturing facility at a GMP level. So we have to consider this, and if we thinking as cannabis or medical cannabis for the process of becoming a drug in the near future, we have to think about medicalization processes, not legalization, but medicalization, and avoid using it or prepare it at home, and be sure to do it in the proper way, such as other drugs are being done. If other of the panelists would like.
I like to extend, giving you just an example. So I don't know if you know, but even if you have a species, doesn't matter which one, and you extract from one flower to the other, it could be a huge difference. So in one flower, you can have 10% of CBD or THC or CBD, depends on what rate of the species you like to consume. And in the other, for the same flower, the other flower can give you a completely different thing. So it varies very much. And one example was that there was an epileptic child that was treated by high CBD, and they got oil, and Rafi Meshulam was involved in it, and one day, so the child was frequently suffer from seizures, like 100 seizures a day, and when he took CBD, it completely abolished the seizures for maybe 2 or 3 times a week. And then one day, it stopped working, and the mother came to Rafi and said, "Look, my child went back to seize." And then they checked the oil, and it was a little bit of change. The THC CBD rate was completely different than the one they used, and it automatically gave her the right doses, and it became to work again. So you have to be very careful. It has to be very precise, very controlled, because it's very dangerous to play with the doses. So you have to be very precise, and just any other medication, you have to know exactly how much you have there and what you give to patients.
Maybe Rami brought a story about an epileptic child. I remember a student coming. I was sitting with Rafi in his office discussing our work. A medical student, came by very shaking, and she said, I must ask you something. She asked Rafi. Said, we had a party on Friday night. One of our students, we had some fun. It took maybe too much, and he's still in the hospital with a very severe psychosis. And this is the same kind that occasionally we used to take. So what happened? And Rafi asked her to bring to the lab a sample from what he took. And he looked at it, analyzed it with his equipment, and said he'd never seen such high THC level. And there is no wonder why this guy suffered from such an attack. So really, if you once had a good time with it, not even as a medical, but as recreational, you should be very careful when you purchase the same, quote unquote, from the same plant or the same flower. You can have different doses, and we have to be very careful, as my other colleagues said.
I just want to add that I understand from where this question is coming, from a point that there is no other choice. However, I think you should be a little bit more patient, and with the coming months, I'm sure that there will be also available treatment that is more precise. I just want to add from my own experience that indeed, even when the children got the cannabis from known factories and not homemade, sometimes at the beginning of the processes, the beginning of this process, the production was not so accurate, and we had those changes in the situation of the children. It was not good for them. Sometimes it's better not to treat it all and not to have these fluctuations. So I know that it's very difficult, but I think that you should wait for more stable production and more, because every batch that we are now getting, we have the precise analysis of everything, and we know that, like medications, you cannot treat it the other way. It's a medication, and you should treat it like a medication.
Thank you very much. Yes, audience questions.
Sí, buenas tardes. Bueno, antes que nada, gracias por las conferencias que han sido excelentes. La pregunta es para todo el panel y es específicamente del tema epilepsias refractarias en el periodo del primer año de vida en relación a los lactantes que tienen epilepsias relacionadas con trastornos genéticos como síndrome de West, Lennox o trastornos de la migración neuronal. Es para todos. Y si han podido lograr algún estudio y alguna comprobación. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. I've heard the question. Regarding the first year of life, most of the studies recruited older children. We have data on few children younger than 1 year, after 6 months or more. With West syndrome, we don't have any data, but with Lennox-Gastaut, which are usually older children, there is studies. There are studies. There is a study published, I think, at the beginning of 2016 in Lancet Neurology, when they have some children with Lennox-Gastaut. Also, the studies that I've showed you from New England Journal of Medicine was on children with genetic problems, with Dravet syndrome, which is a genetic problem, SCN1A mutations usually. And it's working in children with genetic problems, but usually we don't try it as a first choice. Maybe one day we will try it as first choice, but currently we usually try other medications first, and usually not in children younger than 1 year. Those are exceptionals, and I have now, I think, 3 or 4 children younger than 1 year old. One is with ECRD syndrome, and there are a few children with really severe epilepsy from different reasons, like after HIE or things like that, that I am treating with cannabis. So it is possible, and it's probably safe. We do it only in children that we have no other choice, like they have really refractory epilepsy. So I think that in these instances, it's safe. Specifically for West syndrome, we never tried for West syndrome. We give ACTH or Sabril as usually done.
Maybe just to continue what Dr. Aran has been saying, in Israel, the situation is that medical cannabis is allowed for certain indications, but it's not for the first use of it. You have to first acknowledge the fact that you have used other drugs and show that they were not efficient to the child or the patient, and only after proving it, you will get the permission to use medical cannabis. So it's not the first line of treatment currently in Israel as well.
Sí, preguntas.
Buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Silvia Ciocia, de Facultad de Farmacia y Bioquímica, Universidad de Buenos Aires. En primer lugar, quería agradecerles por todo el aporte que nos están brindando desde el lado de su vasta experiencia. Y quería consultar al profesor Rami Shaka, que ayer se extendió mucho hablando sobre el incremento de los niveles de dopamina. ¿Qué estudios se están llevando a cabo respecto a este tema con la aplicación en la enfermedad de Parkinson en su país?
So if I got the question correctly, you're asking what studies are conducted to show that cannabis causes the increase of dopamine or Parkinson? For Parkinson. Okay. So I don't know really much about it, but I assume that, if you have loss of dopamine in Parkinson patient, maybe AD can extend, so it should be helpful for Parkinson patient. We know, and we do some examination on the effect of cannabinoids, THC, CBD, and all the others, and there is clear evidence that dopamine levels are increased. Not to the extent of other drugs of abuse like cocaine, which, as you saw yesterday, extremely increased dopamine levels. So I don't know if the levels of dopamine increased by THC, especially depends on the dose, of course, and the spread of the receptor expression in this area is enough to overcome what we have in Parkinson's disease, but maybe AD can extend for it.
You should also think about the difference of the regions that we are talking about. The Parkinson, it's the substantia nigra and the extrapyramidal part that is affected in Parkinson, and here we're talking about the insula and it's another part. So maybe there is no direct connection between, there are reports, scarce reports, that Parkinsonian patients do benefit from cannabis. But these are not these are not full-scale studies yet.
I want to say generally that the brain has very few neurotransmitters and you should work with them. And not every medication that increase dopamine in a certain place actually does that in other places. In Parkinson, the problem is that the cells, the neurons in the substantia nigra are injured, and then in the basal ganglia we don't have enough dopamine. And the cannabis increase the dose in other places. As said, for example, in ADHD, we give stimulants that increase the dopamine, but they don't work for Parkinson. So you cannot just, based on one action in one place, can elaborate to other places. So it's not working on the motor symptoms in Parkinson disease. We have, of course, other good, other working medications, and also DBS and other things that we can do for Parkinson. But it might help other negative or other symptoms, not non-motor symptoms of Parkinson. It can help.
Sí, preguntas.
Hola, buenas tardes. Antes que nada, un comentario tal vez respecto a que preguntaron de la producción de aceites en la casa. Lamentablemente son situaciones donde tal vez la espera no es la mejor solución, porque hay genéticas en Argentina que funcionan en epilepsia, hay madres que hacen los aceites, hay cultivadores que hacen los aceites y que funcionan. Entonces, esperar a que el gobierno se haga cargo, falta todavía para eso. Recién ahora se modificó la ley y falta 1, 2, 3, 5 años para que hayan aceites nacionales que traten estas situaciones. Pero la pregunta es la siguiente. Ustedes dijeron que al consumir cannabinoides se activan diferentes partes del cerebro, sea el hipotálamo, la corteza cerebral, el brainstem. Mi pregunta es, ¿saben qué cannabinoide activa cada sector con el objetivo de, si el hipotálamo cuando se activa genera que se pierda peso, por ejemplo, o la corteza cerebral se activa y generando, no sé, que se reduzcan ataques o algo? Si yo le doy THC-A sin descarboxilar o descarboxilado, o CBD o CBD descarboxilado, si saben qué cannabinoide activa qué parte del cerebro.
So just let me re-comment on your comment about the fact that the law here in Argentina is not that in progress of what we compare in Israel, and the fact that you need to do it at home and prepare the oils. But at least if this is the situation, and I understand it completely, the oil should be tested and evaluated by chemists, maybe here at the university and research institutions, just to validate the concentration of at least THC and CBD in order to be repeatable during the treatment period of the child or the patient. This should be done, and I understand that initiative in this direction is currently happening here in Argentina between Mama Cultiva and other institutions here. Now, regarding to the activation, specific activation of different brain areas by cannabinoids, I will let Professor Shohami maybe to comment on it, but sorry? Okay. But as far as we know, so it has a general activity. It can activate each and every pathway depending on the dose, depending on the situation, whether it's a normal condition or pathological, and we need to sort it down to a specific research-related question in order to further understand. And
So, of course, the agonist binds the receptor. So if the receptor expressed in all the brain, as I showed very clearly yesterday, it depends on the efficacy of binding, whether it's THC or synthetic agonist of the receptor. So it depends on the expression level, as Yossi said, the pathological condition and so on. So I don't think that you can discriminate one region to the other. It's all a matter of efficacy, dose, and the expression level of the receptor. So if you want to influence one region, not the other, you can't really do it only by micro-injecting the compound into the specific region, because you have no way to discriminate CB1, which is expressed in the cerebral cortex, the one that's expressed in the VTA.
It's like any other medication. It's work on certain receptor or on a certain transporter, but you cannot just target it to specific area of the brain.
I have one more, something else to say about it. CB1 receptor and CB2 are G protein coupled receptors. And as they are G protein, they can activate different signaling pathway, either inhibitory or excitatory. Can be GI, GS, GQ. Now, it become even more complicated in that direction because it depends which tissue is being more favored toward the GS or to the GI, for example, and also the specificity of the ligand that activates the receptor. Because different agonists for the CB1 have been shown to activate different G protein that were associated with CB1. So you cannot look at the narrow idea of only a single pathway. It has to be a very broad one. And if you, as Rami said, you need to do a micro-injection to isolate the specific activity.
If we take it one step further, so we can overcome this problem. Let's say if we know what we want to target, let's say we want to target the cortex, so we can deliver it with a special delivery system that we will use markers on the cerebral cortex, let's say with nanoparticles that will identify that the target, will go to the target and release the content, which will be THC, and therefore you will activate only specifically the receptors within this area. And we have some kind of projects, not with THC, which targeted delivery of drugs, which have receptors all over the place, and you want to target it to a specific brain region because you don't want to interrupt with all the other functions of the brain. So we can overcome, but not with the same agonist and not in a regular manner.
No, but it's a very good question because my ideas are coming now more. So we know the list of areas in the brain that I listed yesterday with the activity, different activity that is modulated by CB1 was actually generated based on a conditional deletion of CB1 receptor in these specific areas. So by using molecular approaches and genetic approaches working in our lab, we can actually design novel mouse strains that lack the CB1 receptor in this specific area, and then by giving these animals the agonist, THC or others, or synthetic cannabinoids, we can dissociate the effect that is modulated in this specific region. And this work has been done tremendously by many groups in the world as well as in Israel.
Hi, my name is Anne Blanchard. My work is in clinical research in Latin America. I work with rare, neglected, orphan, and very frequently there are families that know things, sometimes things work, but they don't, it's difficult to have access. And I think
even though we are a company, we try to help patients access. So I have two questions for the panel. One is about all the drugs or companies, if there are many companies, or if in Israel there are a group of companies that are working with you, of course, in clinically developing these molecules safely, according to ICH GCP. How far are they from being in the market, and how close are these families from being able to import through compassionate access or whatever our regulations may allow us, marketed drugs from Israel in this case that may have been proven efficacious so that they can give to their families. So that was one of my questions. The second question, which is tied to this one, is if you are running clinical trials and we have families here that are needing, if you see a potential opportunity for collaborating with countries like ours that are open to using the drugs for conducting research, using these children as, but receiving drugs that are not manually manufactured but come from industry and from regulated processes. So these are the two questions.
So regarding the first question, I need to briefly summarize to you what was happening in Israel in the drug development industry related to cannabis. So until very recently, the country has gave 8 different companies to grow cannabis and have their own type of strains, high CBD, low CBD, THC, etc. And once the patient received a license from the country, from the government, to get medical cannabis, he just approached the grower, and by using his or her recommendation, he was given the drug. This is not the way it should be. And therefore, the Ministry of Health recognized this effect and established the Israel Medical Cannabis Association, IMCA. It's a unit within the government that basically started almost three or 4 years ago to control everything from the side of production and growing through the manufacturing of the drug until distributing it for the public. And by doing this order and organization, the Minister of Health cut the connection between the patient and the grower, which should be, because the patient should not get any recommendation from the grower which plant should be taken for his or her indication. It should be prescribed by the doctors for a specific amount of a drug, like other drugs, other pills, other medications, and go to the pharmacy in order to get it. And this revolution in Israel that has started a couple of years ago and is going to be implemented on December 2017, just in a few months, in less than 2 months, is going to change the field dramatically in Israel, because the growers will grow cannabis. They will transfer their products to the manufacturing facilities where they will extract and prepare the different oils regarding to a very specific narrow of products that that have listed by the Ministry of Health, and they will transfer the product under a security level to pharmacies. And the pharmacists who will be educated by us, the Multidisciplinary Center on Cannabinoid Research, and the IMCA, will be able to give and educate the patient how to use the drug more specifically. So this is what is going to be happening in less than 2 months from now. And the fact that the Ministry of Health control it from the top actually pushed all the different companies that were exist until now in Israel and develop their own strain to work in the same direction. So this is regarding to the first question. The second one regarding clinical trials of people coming from orphan diseases, suffering from orphan diseases, to clinical trials done in Israel. There are a few clinical trials being conducted in different hospitals around Israel, and it's really a matter of the availability and the possibility of bringing people from abroad to do and to be treated in Israel. It's really a very hard question related to insurance companies and so on. But sorry? It could be done in a way. I'll give it to Dr. Aran to continue.
I just want to add that to import the products that are now produced in Israel, it depends on the regulation in both countries. And Israel recently passed regulations that it is possible to, so we can do it from our side. We can export the cannabis. I don't know if the regulation in Argentina allow to import it, but it depends. If it will be possible, so of course you can import the products that we are using. Regarding collaborations, of course, we will be very happy. I already spoke with few physicians here, and I think the right way to do it is by collaborations. Like, you will treat your own patients. It's not the right way to treat a patient that you don't know, and everyone will treat his patient, and to do a collaboration with the same strains. I know for a fact that the different growers in Israel are very interested in such collaborations. They will happily and they actively search for other fields. You know that Israel, the population in Israel is relatively a small population, and we want to collaborate with other countries, of course. And the growers want to do this collaboration. They are searching for other places, and of course the treatment will be given by them. So it's a solution they will give, like they are doing in researchers in Israel. We don't have to buy it. They are giving the product for the study. So I think it's a good option just to do clinical collaborations.
And I want just to comment that you're always thanking us for coming here. We thank you for coming and spreading the knowledge that we can contribute a little bit, because we have the same goal, just to help people, right? So thank you for coming.
Thank you. You know, actually, I wait so long for the microphone that now I have two questions. But they are both related to the receptor. It's basic science, so I think that Yossi Tam will be the one that could answer it. So my question, the first one, is considering that anandamide and THC and 2G8, they are structurally so different small molecules, and they bind to the same receptor. What's going on there? So it's kind of, they have different affinity bindings, you have allosteric receptors, you have you know if the K-off is different between them, or one induces the binding of the other one. That's the first one. And the second one is, what it's popularly known, it's the different response that different people have to cannabis, not only from the recreational point of view, but also from the medical point of view. So my question is, if it's known anything about heterogeneity of the receptors in the population?
Yeah, let me try and answer the first question. If you draw the chemical structure of anandamide and 2HC, they're really very different. But if you look at the spatial organization of the molecule, you can find some similarity that may explain why this might be the binding site between the molecule and the receptor. So the fact that they bind and the binding is more or less similar in the same range of affinities means that there is some kind of there is enough similarity between the molecules, though it doesn't show when you draw them on a two-dimensional paper. If you look at the structure and the spatial organization of the molecule, there must be some kind of a nucleus that really fits into the pit or into the structure of the receptor, and this might explain the difference between the apparent difference between the molecules, but this receptor is exactly the same one that binds the CBD, the THC, the 2-AG, and anandamide. As to heterogeneity, maybe my colleague.
I will add one more comment to the first question. Last year, two seminal works published both in Nature and in Cell actually cloned and were able to characterize or crystallize the CB1 receptor for the first time. It has been taken for many years and a lot of groups worked on it. So actually by crystallize the structure, only now we understand better where is the binding sites for different agonists or antagonists on this receptor. And basically 2-AG and anandamide are binding it to the same type of to the same orthostatic location, but others molecules are around the same area, but not very to the same in the exact place. And I recommend you to follow these work that were published just last year. Regarding heterogeneity of the receptor, it's just the beginning, but we know also from work came from Josephine Egan that she has reported different subtypes of CB1 receptor. And now we recognize that probably there are short and long and intermediate size of CB1 receptor located specifically in the liver, in the human liver, and we are trying to follow this work that has been done and to see if similar we can identify in other organs, of course in the brain as well.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Primero que nada, soy cultivador recreativo, pero bueno, mi consulta eran dos. El dolor neuropático, ¿lo tratan con vapor o con aceite? Y sobre la vía tópica, ¿qué opiniones tienen o si hay estudios realizados?
If I understand right, there were two questions. One, it's about the absorption, if you will treat the patients with oil or through smoking or vaporization. So we know, and the indication is not so important. So for any indication, we can give the same way. The thing is how to achieve a reasonable absorption, and we call it bioavailability, that it will absorb in a reasonable amount and in a repetitive way. So it's true that through the gastrointestinal system, the absorption is not so good and also not so consistent. Through vaporization is better. Of course, we, as a doctor, cannot recommend on smoking. The problem with absorption through vaporization is that it is short-acting. So it's acting more rapidly. So shortly after you vaporized it, it starts working, but also it's metabolized faster. So you should use it every 3 to 4 hours, and if you take it by oil, you can use it every 8 hours, for example. So it depends on the needs. But you can do both ways. I think that with time we will see more and more vaporizers and less peels, and because the bioavailability is better when it is taken, it's absorbed through the lungs. This was the first question. The second question was about a topic. About a topic. So we know that specifically the CBD is working on the immune system. It's anti-inflammatory, or what we call immune modulator. And also there are studies that were mentioned yesterday by Professor Rafi Meshulam about, for example, graft versus host disease when we target the immune system. So theoretically, it should work on autoimmune diseases like atopic dermatitis, asthma, and so on. There are studies, but we don't have robust results. We have some studies with diseases of the gastrointestinal system, immune diseases, about Crohn. Though in Crohn, I must say that THC is working better than CBD. The CBD was not proven, the THC is proven, so we are not sure about the pathways that it's really working.
And I will add to the effect of atopic dermatitis and allergy. I just want to let you know that, for example, to expand the knowledge, and in our institution, we have just funded a group, two scientists, both Professor Meshulam and Professor Levi Sheffer from our center, to conduct research specifically on the role of CBD in atopic dermatitis and allergy. And this type of work is done in the center. So we get funding from different companies or non-profit organization, and with ideas that comes from the patient or needs, we are expanding our knowledge in that direction.
Buenas tardes. Muchas gracias por sus exposiciones. En principio agradezco al doctor que ofreció la posibilidad de compartir con nosotros la reglamentación que tiene Israel respecto del producto. Yo pertenezco a un centro que se dedica al control de calidad de productos biológicos y pertenece al Ministerio de Salud de la Nación. No sé si será el responsable de controlar estos productos, pero yo estoy aquí para aprender. Y de hecho he aprendido muchas cosas en estos 2 días. Me pregunto lo siguiente: si yo esto lo miro como un producto biológico, tengo que demostrar que es seguro, porque estamos hablando de no producir daño en la gente. Tiene que ser potente, quizás en un ensayo de laboratorio que permita, antes de que llegue a la población, salvar cualquier defecto del producto, y después tiene que demostrarse ser eficaz. Esto se hará en un estudio clínico. Con respecto al producto en particular, me pregunto, ¿cómo se puede demostrar que esto es estable? Porque acá estamos hablando de productos elaborados de distinta manera, aplicados de distinta manera. Y por otro lado, quisiera saber si los laboratorios que lo producen han desarrollado productos estándar o de referencia para poder relativizar la potencia. Y una pregunta más agrego: ¿hay algunos modelos probados en animales que nos permitan ver las actividades? Porque en realidad la carga o la masa que uno pueda demostrar, incluso en una prueba que podría ser una prueba de de una cromatografía líquida de alta presión o alguna prueba similar, no nos habla de la real actividad del producto. Todas estas cuestiones a mí me preocupan a la hora de tener un producto ante mí y no saber exactamente con cuántos elementos cuento, porque en realidad nuestro decreto de reglamentación de la ley tiene 1 mes nomás y esto es todo muy fresco.
I will start with last question that you asked about whether we should test it in animal models before we continue to humans. So this is in a perfect world, I should do it like this. Start with preclinical studies and then continue to the clinic. And you don't hear me?
No, yo me refería a si existen modelos animales de laboratorio que se usan para liberar productos tal como se hace con vacunas, con sueros o con otros productos terapéuticos que son productos biológicos, porque esto, a diferencia de un fármaco, lo que hace falta es determinar la actividad biológica, si se me permite el término.
Yeah, so we are discussing your question here to further understand it, because each and every, both if it's synthetic or biological compound, we tested it in animal models. So we are not quite sure whether we understand correctly your question.
So I think, excuse me, I think that here the point maybe it's that as you have different tests, preclinical tests mainly, to test small compounds or biologicals, in this case, what models you will use. For example, if you have a small compound and you have to do safety of that small compound, you have ADME and so on. If you have a biological, a cytokine, a lymphokine, you will test activity for each batch. So the question is, in this case, what you will be using?
I think there is a matter of terminology here. What is the difference between chemical or biological in this case is not quite clear, because what we get from the plant is a chemical, but it comes from a biological origin, but it's chemical. And what will be synthesized, it's chemical. When you refer to biological drug, we refer to antibodies or this type of molecules. But I think in this case, all the drugs that we are talking about are chemicals that are derived either from plants or synthetically. And as to models, I think there is a variety of models that can be tested for each of the indication. If there is an animal model for this indication, it is tested as a preclinical study, and once proven efficacious and safe, then it can go to the next stage, like in any other drug. So from what we understand, there's not much difference. What is the source? But once it goes through the preclinical phase, and it's safe, should be safe.
And I should add to it regarding the activity you're talking about. There are many ways to measure activity. So if it's a G protein coupled receptor that are well known, we have variety of standards to measure activity of different compounds, assuming that they're activating the G protein coupled receptor, and not ligands that we don't know what they are binding to. So regarding CB1 and CB2, we have standard variety of methods to measure activity of the receptor and to see efficacy and all the other pharmacological classical questions. Don't know if we answer the question for you.
One point that you raised is about stability, and this is the problem because some of the molecules are not stable. 2-AG, for instance, is very unstable, and if we want to use it as a drug, we have to modify it so that it will be more stable and not subjected to enzymatic cleavage or hydrolysis or whatever. But this can be tested in vitro, and assays can be set for that, and then the animal models that will prove the efficacy.
Bueno, yo soy bioquímica, docente y mamá de una nena con autismo. Quería consultarle al doctor Adi Haram si tenía algún registro de los pacientes con los cuales se está llevando el trabajo, de la cantidad de los endocannabinoides que tienen los nenes con autismo la anandamida y el 2AG. Y en cuanto a concentración, ¿cómo se ve eso? Y otra de las cosas es, en el caso de mi nena, nosotros estamos con 2 tipos de aceites distintos y nos está pasando que queremos regular un poco más su tratamiento, la llevamos muy bien, tiene un montón de cambios en lo cognitivo, conductual, pero quería consultarle a ver si usted me puede indicar qué cepa puede llegar a ser, pero no para controlar comportamientos disruptivos, que no es lo que ella tiene, sino efecto terapéutico, que es lo que nosotros estamos buscando. Y por último, ya que agarré el micrófono, una de las consultas es si tiene un registro de los nenes que usted está haciendo el tratamiento. Si tienen dieta, nosotros hacemos con ella una dieta libre de gluten, de lactosa, de caseína y de derivados de soja. Que para ellos son tan tóxicos debido a que están muy enfermos gastrointestinalmente.
Okay, I will try to remember all the questions. Just a second. The first, I will start with the last one that I remember, and then we continue. The last question was about special diets for children with autism. I know that many families, because they are so desperate to help the situation of the children, are trying many things, including diets, and it's really a lot of patients. Like I think some studies quote the number of 80% of the families of children with autism are trying diets, but it was not proven so far to help in any way, not the casein-free, not the gluten-free, and there are many diets that have been tried. For some children, it helps the gastrointestinal symptoms that sometimes accompany the autism, but it doesn't help the core symptoms, the communication problem. Another question was about the endocannabinoid, thank you, Dr. Tam, about the endocannabinoid levels in children with ASD. So to date, there are 2 studies, there are not a lot of studies, who suggested, the first studies suggested that the endocannabinoid system is involved also in humans, because in animal models, as I have mentioned, there are several studies that demonstrated involvement of the endocannabinoid system. But in humans, there are 2 studies, one about the receptors, the CB1 receptors, and the other one, if I remember right, it's about 2-HG. So there are hints that the endocannabinoid system is involved, but I cannot say that there are robust data to suggest involvement in humans. Regarding the strains and the effect on communication, on the core symptoms of autism rather than the behavioral, in our cohort that contain mostly children with behavioral problems, we also saw effect on communication, on the core symptoms. But you have to remember that all of the children that were recruited also had behavioral problems. We didn't recruit children without behavioral problems. Till now, I think I have experience with more than 200 children, and all of them had behavioral problems. So I don't know if it will improve communication in children without behavioral problems. Because once you treat the behavioral problems, the child is less occupied with the behavior. He can think for a second before he reacts, before he has outbursts, so maybe this is what improves his communication. So I cannot answer your question yet if the cannabis might improve the core symptoms of autism in children without behavioral problems. Yeah, and of course, as I said in the lecture, regarding the endocannabinoid system in autism, I hope that we will have more robust robust answer in the next year because, as I said, we are collaborating with a laboratory of Dr. Tam about measuring markers of the activity of the endocannabinoid system in children with autism. We have many patients and we have blood samples from them, so we will know the answer for your question, but we don't know it yet. We will know it hopefully next year.
Hola, buenas tardes. Yo soy una de las mamás que hace el descanso. Estuve hablando ayer con Adi y mi pregunta era, ¿cómo en pacientes con epilepsia, cómo manejan el tema de la tolerancia al cannabis? Porque lo que nos está pasando acá, en pacientes que están utilizando productos estandarizados, tenemos un producto estandarizado que es el aceite de Charlotte, que es el único que podíamos importar hasta el momento. Y lo que nos sucede con estos pacientes es que pasado determinado tiempo generan tolerancia, inclusive aumentando dosis. Quería saber cómo lo manejan ustedes en estos casos, si hay un límite de aumento de dosis, cómo lo manejan. Esa es la primera pregunta. Y después, la segunda pregunta, tenemos pacientes que han podido dejar de consumir anticonvulsivantes convencionales con el uso de cannabis, siempre en forma de aceite. La pregunta es, ¿recomiendan ustedes utilizar únicamente cannabis para tratamientos de epilepsias tipo síndrome de West, Lennox, Dravet? La tercera pregunta, recién Adi mencionaba que en autismo mencionó una cepa y no pude entender bien el nombre de la cepa que estaban utilizando y quería saber qué cepas utilizan en autismo y en epilepsia y en qué formas la usan, si la usan en forma de aceite, si se aíslan las moléculas, si se aíslan los terpenoides. Y también eso, si están aislando moléculas para hacer preparados magistrales, por ejemplo. Muchas.
Again, I will try to remember all questions. The first question was about tolerance, and it's true that as in any other medication, when we start the medication, sometimes low doses help, and then we need to increase the dose. Some medications we have what we call a honeymoon. It helps at the beginning and then it helps less and we increase the dose. And it's the same with cannabis. I don't think that there is tolerance and you need to stop the medications once in a while, as I've said earlier. Regarding the dose, the common dose for epilepsy is up to 20 milligrams per kilograms per day of CBD, but there are studies that have tried even higher doses up to 50 milligrams per kilograms per day, but usually we don't exceed the 20 milligrams. And we don't know about tolerance. Regarding the strains that we use in Israel for autism, and we tried it in Israel, it doesn't say that these are the only strains that are working. Probably other strains will work too, but there are 3 names that we are working with. I can say the names. It's Topaz, it's Avidekel, and Cheese Pie or EP1, but these are only the names of strains. And the ratio, what's important is the ratio that we use CBD-based strains. Usually we start with 20 times more CBD than THC. There was also another question about stopping medication. So in autism and especially in epilepsy, usually or always, we never stop medication when we start the treatment. Sometimes we start the treatment after the patients failed few other medications and they are with no medications when we start, and then this is the only treatment. Sometimes we start with other medications, and with time, gradually, slowly, the patients decrease with our recommendation the doses till we stop the medications. It happens more in autism than with epilepsy. In autism, I think about a third of the patients can stop medications with time, but in epilepsy, usually not. If the patient is really stable, we can decrease the dose as we usually do in epilepsy, but it takes time, a lot of time, not a long months, a long years. About how to give it, as I've answered earlier, usually we give it with oil and as a whole plant extract. We don't do 99% pure. In the study that we are doing now, we also assess the 99% pure cannabinoids, but we don't have results for that study yet. And we don't know if the whole plant extract will work better. We think our theory is that the whole plant extract will work better, that there is an entourage effect and other components of the cannabis plant are also important. But this is a theory. We don't know. You know that in epilepsy, the studies that I have shown are with 99% pure cannabinoids. The Epidiolex that they use for Dravet, for example, is 99% pure CBD without any other, and it worked. But in autism, we think that there is an entourage effect and the whole plant extract will work better. I cannot hear you, sorry.
The dosage of 20 milligrams per kilo of CBD or
of CBD
or 50 that you said is in autism?
No, in
or
epilepsy. In autism, usually you need lower doses, up to 10 milligrams per kilograms per day.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bien, yo quería consultarles si habían investigado respecto a las enfermedades dérmicas como una segunda o una tercera posibilidad de suministrar cannabinoides mediante la absorción dérmica, digamos. Como ser el eczema, la dermatitis o la psoriasis también.
In general, skin diseases, there is a few observational studies that have been shown that cannabis and more specifically the endocannabinoid is involved in psoriasis and atopic dermatitis. Currently, there are two scientists in the center that are conducting research in this direction. I don't have yet the answer to give you, but maybe in the near future we will have more to share with you.
Hello, I'm again Matthias. I have a question. It's about if there is a way or there is someone that's studying how to see as the endocannabinoid system is so complex and has so interrelation in between pathways, in between different systems, metabolic system, neurological system, everything that you explained to us, there is a way to start to see how an endocannabinoid system is in a person, to see how and where to start with the medication. For example, in a clinical way, if I want to check the neurological stage of a person, I can do it. If I want to make a digestive overview, I can do it. And I want to see the microbiome of a digestive system, I can do it. There's a way, or you imagine a way to see how to start to seeing where to start with the endocannabinoid system or the stage of the endocannabinoid system, because of course the person with cancer is going to respond differently to a painkiller than the person that never been to a cancer or chemotherapy or radiotherapy or whatever situation, disease situation. That's the question. And I have a reflection to end. I think this is a moment, it's really special for me because I'm a doctor, but also I have like an informal biological and permaculture formation. I work with the land, I work with systems, with regenerative systems. So this is a special moment because it's both worlds are getting in contact. The scientific world with the botanic, difficult to manage world, you know. And in this situation, you talk about like, yes, this is a botanic plant, but with a chemical extract. So this plant is not only a medicament or just like a pill. It's putting us, the scientific world, in this situation that we have to retrust in the nature, in the simple path of nature. Because also the plant is showing us an endosystem that we didn't hear before, we didn't knew before. So I think it's not just a medicament. I think it's a paradigm. It's like changing our view of the botanical world again.
I really acknowledge your comment at the end about the relationship of humans with nature and back to the plant itself. And in fact, by acknowledging it, we can now realize that it has beneficial effect, but we need to be educated first. And you are probably appreciated as a medical doctor because you haven't been learned at medical school about the endocannabinoid system. And this is the status also around the globe. So we have to start to educate the medical practitioners about the fact that we have endogenous system that is being modulated by a plant. And by doing so, then you can take this plant and explore it to therapeutic use. And this regarding this comment. Now, regarding the status of the endocannabinoid system, in general, as a doctor, we would like to, of course, identify endocannabinoids as biomarkers for any both normal and pathological conditions. I would love to say that we will have the possibility to do it, but we are not yet there. When we are talking about endocannabinoid system, we have to distinguish between the receptors, which is hard to detect because we will not gain to take tissue samples from patients and evaluating the expression of the receptor. But we have the endocannabinoids, which until very recently we were not able to measure in blood samples because of detection method. We were able to extract it because those are lipids. We were able to extract those compounds from different tissues and see whether it is correlate with the expression of the receptor and the disease. Nowadays, with advanced technology, we have the capability of extracting the different array of endocannabinoids, anandamide, 2-AG, the main ones, but also other endocannabinoid-like compounds such as palmitoyl etanolamide, olesyl etanolamide, arachidonic acid, olesyl glycine, olesyl serine. All this huge amount of fatty acid derivatives is available to us nowadays. And we are working very hard to try to get, first of all, the snapshot of what happened in different diseases, as I showed in my presentation, in obesity, fatty liver disease, and others. But in other diseases, other scientists around the globe are also able to do it. Now, in order to establish it as a biomarker that has a tone at the beginning of a disease that is probably changed after a therapeutic, either by cannabis or by other type of drug, we will have to gain more data about the time course of the disease, about the time of selecting and collecting the blood samples, and we are not yet there. We are developing also a methodology, specifically in my lab, that will try to simplify the way of extracting endocannabinoid and validating. Nowadays, it takes us around 2 days to complete the study because we need to do lipid extraction and then measure it in the LCMS and so on. We are not trying to minimize it to get just immediately at the blood sample to get the values like other biochemical analysis that is done in the clinic. But I hope that in the near future we will have more data about it.
La pregunta que voy a hacer ahora está fuera de los términos netamente técnicos de la investigación y la quiero hacer aprovechando la posibilidad que se abre ahora en la Argentina de poder iniciar la investigación, como ustedes tienen la posibilidad en su país, de hacerlo ahora también en la Argentina. Y la pregunta está dirigida a cómo obtienen ustedes en cada uno de los laboratorios y de las cátedras que llevan adelante los recursos materiales y económicos para poder sostener la investigación. Si provienen del sector privado, si provienen del sector público, si una combinación de ambos.
It's definitely a combination of all the institutions that you just mentioned. Each and every one of the scientists in the center is being funded by governmental institutions such as the Israel Science Foundation, the European Science Foundation, the NIH even. So we can approach with our grant proposal and research idea to these non-profit organizations to get money to fund the research that is being done at the center. Besides that, we have interest from different biotech companies, startup companies that would like to invest in research that is done in the center, identify a specific indication that they are interested in, and then they are able to initiate research collaborative studies with us in order to get the first right refusal at the end if something is being evolved and developed, to further develop it into clinical pathway. So everything is open. Money is an issue, a big issue in research, as you probably know and acknowledge. But I think that we are in a time point, not only in Israel, but around the globe, where the interest in cannabis is so huge, but we have to do it correctly to get this support to do evidence-based medicine. By doing so, we will make much more advance in the near future to human health.
Última pregunta, corta, por favor.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Buenas tardes. Yo quería saber qué evidencia tienen sobre esclerosis múltiple.
Okay, it's not my research topic, but there are studies now that prove that cannabis is, and here we are talking about usually 50-50 CBD and THC, 1-to-1 ratio, that it is working especially for the spasticity in multiple sclerosis. So it is in the recent, even in the former meta-analysis that has been done, and specifically in the newer meta-analysis, it is a proven method to reduce spasticity in MS, in multiple sclerosis. So you can use it for the spasticity, and also it has other effects on sleep and pain and other aspects of any chronic disease like multiple sclerosis.
Yes, in my talk yesterday, I showed a model of multiple sclerosis, which the animal model of multiple sclerosis is called EAE, encephalopathy and allergic encephalopathy. And the two models of EAE done in Thessaloniki by our colleagues there have shown that both by endocannabinoid, the 2-AG that they use, they can both delay the onset of the disease and reduce the symptoms. So both the symptoms were more mild and the onset was delayed, so it has a component, and the major effect was due probably to the anti-inflammatory effect of the endocannabinoid. So in case of disease which has an inflammatory component, the effect can be quite obvious.
Bueno, profesora Diarán, doctor Yossi Tam, profesor Amiaka, profesor Esther Shoshani, muchísimas gracias.